The divorce was finished. At least that was what Blake Mercer believed as he sat comfortably in the courtroom. Legs crossed, expensive suit pressed to perfection. The air smelled of polished wood and old paper, the kind of smell that usually made people nervous. But Blake felt relaxed, confident, victorious. He checked his watch and smiled to himself. This hearing was nothing more than a formality now. The paperwork had already been prepared, the assets carefully hidden, the lawyers paid well to make sure everything went his way. All that remained was for the judge to speak the final words and sign the order. After that, he would walk out a free man, richer than before, while his wife would walk out with nothing. Across the room sat Aleliana. She looked small in her chair, her shoulders slightly hunched, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She wore a simple gray cardigan and plain black shoes, nothing like the designer dresses Blake once forced her to wear to impress his colleagues. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table in front of her. She didn't look at Blake. She hadn't looked at him once since the hearing began. To Blake, that silence meant surrender. He assumed she was broken, finally accepting defeat after years of emotional pressure, manipulation, and quiet cruelty. For 10 years, Blake had controlled everything. He controlled the money, the conversations, the narrative. When Aleliana questioned him, he told her she didn't understand business. When she asked about missing funds, he told her she was paranoid. When she tried to stand up for herself, he reminded her that she didn't earn anything and that everything they had existed because of him. Slowly, carefully, he trained her to doubt herself. And when the marriage finally collapsed, he made sure the divorce would crush her completely. He had moved money into offshore accounts under fake company names. He had transferred assets into trusts that only he controlled. He had even convinced her that the house they lived in was never truly hers. Every step was calculated, every lie documented. And now, sitting there in the courtroom, Blake felt untouchable. His lawyer leaned back confidently beside him, already packing documents as if the case were done. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at the file. She spoke calmly, reading through the final points of the settlement. Blake barely listened. His mind was already somewhere else. He imagined the champagne he would drink later that night. He imagined texting his girlfriend with the good news. He imagined Aleliana packing her things quietly, leaving the house that was never really hers, disappearing from his life forever. Then the judge looked up. "Before I sign this order," she said, "I want to ask one final question." The room grew quiet. She turned toward Aleliana. "Mrs. Mercer, do you or your counsel have anything to add?" Blake smirked. He leaned back slightly, folding his arms. This was it, the last chance, and he was sure she had nothing. Aleliana slowly lifted her head. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice soft but steady. "We are waiting for a witness." Blake laughed out loud. It was short and sharp, echoing slightly in the courtroom. "A witness?" he said. "This case is finished." The judge frowned slightly and glanced at the clock. "I will allow 60 seconds, she said. "If no witness appears, I will finalize the divorce." The ticking of the clock felt louder than before. Blake tapped his fingers lightly against his knee. He wasn't worried. He was amused. He had done his homework. Aleliana had no friends with power, no wealthy family, no connections. Her parents were nothing, at least that was what he had always believed. That was what she had always told him. 30 seconds passed. Blake leaned toward his lawyer and whispered, "This is embarrassing." 10 seconds remained. Then the courtroom doors opened. They didn't creak softly. They opened with force. 2 men in dark suits stepped inside first. They weren't court officers. Their posture was sharp, alert. Their eyes scanned the room with quiet authority. The atmosphere changed instantly, like the pressure before a storm. Behind them walked an older man. He moved slowly, deliberately, leaning on a silver-topped cane. His suit was perfectly tailored, charcoal gray, understated but expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. His hair was silver, neatly combed back. His face carried lines carved by years of command, not weakness. The room went silent. Aleliana stood. "Dad," she whispered. Blake's stomach tightened. The man stopped near the front of the courtroom and looked directly at the judge. "My name is Arthur Caldwell," he said calmly. "I am here on behalf of my daughter." Blake felt a chill move through his chest. Arthur Caldwell. The name hit him like a physical blow. Arthur Caldwell was the majority owner of the Phoenix Group, the massive corporate empire Blake worked for. The company that funded his lifestyle. The company whose money he had quietly been stealing from for years, believing no one would ever notice. Arthur turned his gaze toward Blake. "And I believe," he continued, "that this man has been hiding marital assets, committing fraud, and stealing from my company." Blake stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "This man has no right to be here." The judge raised her hand sharply. "Sit down," she ordered. Arthur nodded slightly and motioned to one of the men behind him. A thick folder was placed on the judge's desk, then another on the table in front of Blake's lawyer. Bank records, transfer logs, shell companies, offshore accounts. Everything Blake thought was invisible was laid out in black and white. Blake's lawyer flipped through the pages, his face draining of color. "What is this?" Blake whispered. Arthur leaned forward slightly, resting both hands on his cane. "You moved money into a company called Apex Holdings," Arthur said. "You believed it was independent. It isn't. It belongs to me." Blake's breath caught in his throat. "You didn't hide the money," Arthur continued calmly. "You handed it directly back to the family you were trying to rob." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge read silently, her expression hardening with every page. Blake opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The judge struck the gavel. "This settlement is void," she said firmly. "All assets are frozen pending investigation." She turned toward Aleliana. "The court awards Mrs. Mercer full ownership of the marital home, all shared assets, and the recovered funds." Blake shouted, slamming his hands on the table, but it didn't matter anymore. Police officers entered the courtroom as Blake was placed in handcuffs. He turned back toward Aleliana. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was calm, whole, free. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Aleliana breathed deeply, as if she had been holding her breath for 10 years. Her father stood beside her, no longer a powerful executive, just a father who wished he had stepped in sooner. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Aleliana shook her head. "It's over," she replied. "That's what matters." She didn't look back at the building. She didn't need to. because the divorce had been finished long before the judge signed the papers. That it ended the moment the truth walked through the courtroom doors. The courthouse steps were crowded, but Aleliana barely noticed the people moving around her. The noise, the voices, the clicking of cameras all faded into the background as she stood still, letting the weight she had carried for so long finally slip away. The sky above was pale and open, and for the first time in years she felt as if she could breathe without permission. Her father stood beside her in quiet support, not saying much, just being there, which somehow mattered more than any speech he could have made. She realized then that strength did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it entered a room calmly, spoke the truth, and changed everything. Inside the courthouse, Blake Mercer was being led down a narrow hallway, the sound of his shoes echoing off the tiled floor. The confidence he once wore like armor had collapsed completely. His mind raced, searching for excuses, for ways to regain control, but there were none left. The lies that once protected him now surrounded him like walls closing in. Every step forward felt heavier than the last, as if the building itself was pushing him toward the reality he had spent years avoiding. He wasn't thinking about money anymore. He wasn't thinking about reputation. All he could think about was how quickly everything had slipped through his fingers. As the doors closed behind him, Blake finally understood the cost of underestimating quiet strength. He had mistaken silence for weakness, patience for submission, kindness for stupidity. He had believed that power came from dominance, from winning at all costs. But standing alone, stripped of titles and illusions, he saw the truth too late. Power had never been about control. It had been about character, something he had never bothered to build. Aleliana got into the waiting car and rested her head back against the seat. Her hands no longer trembled. The future no longer felt like a dark hallway with no exit. It felt open, uncertain, but hers. She didn't feel the need to celebrate or prove anything. The victory wasn't in what Blake had lost, but in what she had regained. Her voice, her peace, her sense of self. As the car pulled away from the courthouse, she looked ahead, not behind, knowing that the chapter she had just closed would never define her again.